insane, you guys. I'm shocked by this news. So let me set the stage for you guys. I'm at PT, I'm rehabbing my knee, doing my dry needling, my squats, my lifting, all this stuff, and I get an ESPN notification come across my phone that says Neko Gumake becomes the first player known to join.
All right. So the head of the WNBA Players Association recently joined a league supported by Saudi Arabia that is actively attempting to dismantle the WNBA. And she accomplished it during the most significant contract discussions in the history of women's basketball. Most likely, you're asking yourself, wait, what? This is untamed. Because Nneka Onwuameke's actions have an impact on more people than simply her. Every player in the league is impacted by it. You'll see why this could be the turning point by the end of the film. However, this is what the majority of people are lacking.
A league that will rival the WNBA. It's a 5v5 league. It is backed by Saudi Arabian money. So essentially, a lot of money is backing this league. It's in Europe and Asia. The games will be played overseas for 14 weeks, and they want 66 players. And the very first one to be announced is Nneka.
Have you noticed that? Compete with the WNBA. Not praise it, not cooperate with it. Compete with it. And here's the thing. We are discussing Saudi Arabian currency. The same money that essentially declared, we don't care if anyone watches, we're paying you anyway, while removing golfers from the PGA. In a moment, I'll show you those figures. However, you must first comprehend what is now taking place at that negotiation table. Because Danica is not the only one with a conflict of interest. Each and every individual bargaining on behalf of the players at that table has stock in other leagues. Nfisa Collier and Brianna Stewart established unrivaled. Alicia Clark, Elizabeth Williams, Brianna Turner, and Kelsey Plum all own stock in Athletes Unlimited, another off-season league. We'll give you more money, but you can't play in off-season leagues, the WNBA owners say. What do you suppose occurs?
So Nneka said in an interview with the Associated Press, she said that the compensation package was key to her signing with Project B. She said it's not something that's usually offered to us, and by us, I mean women athletes. So for there to be an entry level of equity across the board.
The essential translation was the compensation package. The WNBA could never match the amount of money they put at her. Here's the worst part. Project B offers more than simply increased pay. Players are receiving equity holdings in the league. It sounds fantastic, doesn't it? Hold on, though. I've previously dealt in equities. Additionally, there is something about these stock agreements that no one is telling you. Cashing out at any time is not an option. The business must endure throughout time. For you to see actual money, it must either sell or go public. Furthermore, we're not discussing the enormous ownership stakes that everyone envisions, but rather percentages of percentages. Here's what makes this situation even more absurd, though.
Off-season league, but they have promoted themselves as a league that wants to rival the WNBA. When Unrivaled was coming out with their league, they always said that they don't want it to compete with the WNBA. It is something that's completely different. It's 3v3. It's all of these things. That was that, and the WNBA still doesn't like that, okay? Do you think for 1 second that the WNBA...
Have you heard what she just said? This is just one more chance to take advantage of those opportunities. For example, the WNBA is currently only one choice among many. And you know what? She is correct because unity breaks down when you are the president of the Players Association and you are meant to be pushing for a better deal for everyone in the league, but you've already secured your own bag with a competing organization. The leverage vanishes. The athletes that are most in need of the WNBA are the ones who suffer the most. I'm referring to middle-tier basketball players on hardship contracts who aspire to play professionally in the States. They are not being offered contracts by Project B. The top 66 players are their aim. That's all. What happens to the other players if negotiations fail and the WNBA season is locked out? Nowhere. However, this is where it gets.
Backed by Saudi money, no other league is going to be able to compete, even the WNBA. No other league is going to be able to compete with the amount of money that they will pay players. And the thing is, they will pay these players and they don't care if the league ever profits. They don't care if people watch. They don't care if people tune in. They don't care if there's butts in seats. They're gonna...
Let me demonstrate what happens when Saudi money enters a sport. In 2024, The average number of viewers for the PGA Tour's final rounds was 2.66 million. For Lviv Golf, it was 385,000. On Sundays, the PGA Tour averaged 3.1 million viewers. The highest-rated Lviv of the year was unable to reach 500,000 viewers. However, the most absurd part is that live golfers are paid exponentially more than PGA Tour players because Saudi Arabia doesn't care about ratings, using athletics. Been made public on the format reviews for Project B.
Reviews. Project B, which intends to stream its games, will see players competing on a traveling circuit just like golf, tennis, and auto racing. I'm sorry, this is just crazy. Like, we haven't seen anything like this in professional sports, okay? We truly haven't. We want premier cities, and our goal is to create an F1 style
An F1 style television event that travels to major cities to award a global winner. They are genuinely attempting to reimagine basketball as a worldwide spectacle. You may be asking yourself, okay, but what's wrong with that? There should be more chances for female athletes, right? This is the issue. The product is diluted when the sport is divided across several leagues. It was the best season ever for the WNBA. Keep track of attendance and viewership. Millions of new fans were attracted by Caitlin Clark and Angel Ree. The momentum was crazy. These fans now have to decide between watching Project B, Unrivaled, Athletes Unlimited, and the WNBA. The casual watcher who recently began making payments are no longer available. They are not adhering to 4 distinct leagues. However, there is something even more sinister going on behind the scenes that no one is discussing.
Think there's any way in hell that they can keep that momentum going to a different league, especially a league that is going to be overseas. Yes, you might get some global basketball fans involved, but I personally just don't see it. And so I don't blame the players for taking the money, but if anybody thinks that this league is just going to immediately rival the WNBA and put up crazy, like I said, the results of this league don't matter. So I don't know how this affects the WNBA.
Have you heard what she just said? Basketball has always been more than just a sport. One of the best players in WNBA history, Candace Parker, is pushing Project B. Without a genuine interest in the game's future, players have carried it. In essence, she is stating that women's basketball has been let down by the WNBA. You know what's crazy? She may be correct. Here's the problem, though. What message does it send to the owners at the negotiating table when all these renowned players openly endorse a rival league? You are no longer needed, it tells them. We have an alternative. And the players desire precisely that kind of leverage, don't they? Make the WNBA pay or risk losing its stars. However, there is a serious problem with a tactic that is going to blow up in everyone's face.
Middle tier players. It's those players who are coming in on hardship contracts. It's those players who want to stay in the States and their dream was to play for the WNBA. Like, those are the players who are most affected if the WNBA season stalls, if the WNBA season locks out. This Project B is talking about the top 66 players. I doubt that they care about some hardship player who's coming in and out.
The players that we don't discuss. This is the part that saddens me because there are athletes vying for roster places while Mecca Agam is landing her Project B contract, Breanna Stewart is creating her unparalleled empire, and all of these celebrities are receiving equity holdings in various leagues. Players with hardship contracts who are brought up for a few games before being benched. Players whose only source of income is being selected for a WNBA team. Additionally, those players have nowhere to go if the discussions fail and the season is shut out. They are not being contacted by Project B. They're not getting equity from Unrivaled. They've just finished. They lose their dream, because the stars at the negotiating table put their own side agreements ahead of collective bargaining. Here's what exacerbates the situation.
League who promotes their league as the rival league to the WNBA. And again, I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. It could be getting so bad that NECA's like, you know what? Everybody else at this table, all of these women that I have been fighting for, everyone else at this table is signed with somebody else. Why can't I? Why can't I take a bigger paycheck?
Every other person seated at this table has a contract with someone else. Why am I unable to? That is the psychology underlying NECA's choice. To be honest, I understand. Why would you be the only one making a sacrifice when you look around the negotiation table and see that every other player representative has secured their own backup plan? Given that everyone else has already hedged their risks, why would you be the only one pursuing a better WNBA deal? The prisoner's dilemma is a classic example of game theory in action. Everyone is operating in their own best interests, which results in the worst possible outcome for the group as a whole. This is when it becomes completely crazy, though. And while doing this study, I discovered this.
With players, because now all of these players have equity and stake in these other leagues, and it's always been like this, and we've talked about it. I'm sorry if I'm rambling at this point, but I'm trying to wrap my mind around how any of this makes sense. Does this give them more leverage now? Does it make the conflict of interest worse? And my mind's kind of going to like, yeah, it makes it a bigger
It increases the conflict of interest. Imagine what would happen if the WNBA said, okay, we'll give you higher salaries, better revenue split, all the things you're asking for, but you can't play in off-season leagues. Contracts with off-season leagues have already been signed by every individual present at the negotiation table. NECA actually founded Unrivaled alongside Project B and Breanna Stewart. Without violating their contracts or giving up their equity shares, they are unable to accept that deal. What is their sole move, then? Strive for an agreement that permits off-season play, or let the talks fall through and continue playing in their other leagues. Additionally, if the WNBA season is shut out, unmatched in the project has enormous benefits. There will be more players available, and their leagues will receive greater attention. The WNBA's momentum completely disappears. And you know what? I suddenly realized that this might be the entire play.
I would be very interested to know who those other players are. I would be very interested to know if Angel and Sabrina are one of those two players because they chose not to play in Unrivaled.
If those two players include Angel and Sabrina. All right, so Project B revealed that they had already signed additional players who have not yet been made public. This season, both Sabrina Ionescu and Angel rejected Unrivaled. Everyone thought they were simply focusing on rest and recuperation during the off-season. However, what happens if they accept proposals from Project B and reject Unrivaled? Consider it. Two of the most well-known figures in women's basketball at the moment are Angel and Sabrina. The whole scene changes if Project B announces their neck, because you now have Nessa, Sabrina, Angel, and anybody they have agreed to go to a Saudi-backed league with the ability to outspend everyone. With that amount of money, the WNBA cannot compete. Unrivaled is unable to match that sum of money. And when the best players begin to depart, the dominoes fall quickly. However, this is the section that ought to frighten everyone. Where this is going, recall what occurred with Levy Golf. The PGA Tour retaliated. All V players were prohibited from participating in PGA events. They presented Alvi as a danger to the sport's integrity. You are aware of what took place. The athletes who attended. Yes, Levi was compensated, but their legacies suffered a blow. Supporters turned against them. They were charged of caving in to a tyranny, had a terrible record on human rights. And because Saudi Arabia isn't supporting Project B out of altruism, women's basketball is set to face the same reckoning. While women in Saudi Arabia continue to experience structural discrimination and the players who sign with Project B, this is sports washing utilizing women's empowerment as a PR ploy. They will be held accountable for that. How can you defend accepting funding from a government that limits women's rights at every press conference and interview? That is the question that will be asked, and there isn't a suitable response. However, there is a larger pattern here that ties everything together, so let's take a moment to zoom out. The Queenier just experienced a breakthrough. Keeper record ratings, packed arenas, and significant sponsors at last taking notice. The future of women's basketball was meant to be guaranteed at this point. Instead of long-term stability, better TV agreements, and larger incomes, the sport is disintegrating. Several leagues are vying for the same players' attention. Everyone at the table has opposing interests, and a Saudi-backed group is stepping in to steal the biggest stars with money that makes everyone else look broke, causing the negotiations to come to a stalemate. This is precisely what took place in boxing. Because they were unable to determine who was the real wager, a number of organizations, champions, and supporters lost interest. The sport broke up and lost its popularity. Appeal. Additionally, women's basketball is about to do the same error. What then takes place? This is what I think will happen. More well-known names are announced by Project B. Angel and Sabrina, A.A. Wilson, and possibly Brianna Stewart. The WNBA talks drag on for months if the unparalleled confrontation doesn't stop her. Gamers become irritated. A few of them begin criticizing the league in public. The 2025 season either doesn't begin at all or starts late. Those casual viewers who only become interested in women's basketball last year go on. They don't care enough to keep up with this drama, and the impetus wanes. In the meantime, Project B's games are played to modest audiences and considerably lower TV ratings in Europe and Asia. However, they are unconcerned. They continue to pay the players enormous incomes, since creating a long-lasting league was never the goal. It has to do with global impact and sports washing. The WNBA is still in existence, but it has become weaker. The time of breakthrough has passed. The stars are divided across several leagues. Additionally, the players in the intermediate tier most needed this momentum. They bear the consequences. Unless anything is altered, unless the participants at the negotiation table understand that they're going to ruin the cause they say they are fighting for, unless they realize that breaking up the sport is not worth the short-term money from Saudi Arabia, unless they acknowledge the advantages of the WNBA's success. All of them, not just the celebrities, but all the girls who aspire to be professional basketball players in the future. Because this is the reality. The only league that truly matters in the long run is the WNBA. It is the only one with a foundation that has been established over many years, a history and a legacy. Unrivaled, maybe entertaining. Opportunities may arise from athletes unlimited, but Project B is a pipe dream. If the WNBA is still in existence, those players will return once Saudi money stops flowing as soon as they determine they have received enough favorable publicity. Yes, this is a mess. The most significant women's basketball narrative that no one has yet completely understood. Because Neko Awik's signing with Project B, the future of the entire sport is at stake. It concerns whether women's basketball makes the most of its breakthrough or fractures into oblivion. It concerns the players' ability to set aside their personal interests for the benefit of the group as a whole. And it doesn't look good at the moment. However, when Project B reveals their upcoming signings, we'll see what transpires. We'll watch how the WNBA talks develop. We'll watch to see if the players see their impending defeat before it's too late. What do you suppose will happen next? Will the WNBA make it through this? Please share your predictions below.